The stars were wrong. That was the first thing Dr. Evelyn Carter noticed when she stepped onto the observation deck of the deep space research vessel, Erebus. The stars were wrong, not in their positions. Those were meticulously charted and unchanging, but in their light. They flickered faintly, as though something vast and unseen moved between them and the ship, casting shadows that had no right to exist in the vacuum of space. Evelyn tried to shake the feeling, chalking it up to the fatigue of a 6-month journey into the uncharted reaches of the galaxy. But the unease lingered, a cold knot in her chest that refused to unravel. The Erebus was humanity's most ambitious project, a vessel designed to explore the edges of known space and beyond. Its mission was simple: to seek out new worlds, new resources, and, if possible, new life. But Evelyn knew the unspoken truth behind the mission. Humanity was desperate. Earth was dying, its resources depleted, its climate irreparably damaged. The Erebus was not just a ship of exploration, it was a ship of salvation, and Evelyn, an astrophysicist with a reputation for solving the unsolvable, had been chosen to lead its scientific team. She stared out the observation window, her reflection a ghostly overlay on the infinite black. The stars' flickering grew more pronounced, their light dimming and brightening in irregular pulses. She reached for her tablet, pulling up the ship's sensor readings. The data was inconclusive, showing only minor fluctuations in ambient radiation. But Evelyn's instincts screamed that something was wrong. She turned away from the window, her boots clicking against the metal floor. As she made her way to the bridge, Captain Marcus Hale stood at the helm, his broad frame silhouetted against the glow of the control panels. He turned as Evelyn approached, his face grim. "You feel it too," he said, his voice low. It wasn't a question. Evelyn nodded. "The stars... they're not right. The sensors aren't picking up anything unusual, but you know," Marcus interrupted. "I've been a pilot for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this. It's like the universe itself is holding its breath." The words sent a chill down Evelyn's spine. She opened her mouth to respond, but a sudden alarm blared through the ship, cutting her off. The lights dimmed, replaced by the harsh red glow of emergency lighting. Evelyn's tablet buzzed in her hand, and she glanced down to see a flood of error messages scrolling across the screen. "Report," Marcus barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. One of the crew members, a young engineer named Jansen, looked up from his console, his face pale. "It's the engines, Captain. They're failing. We're losing power," Marcus swore under his breath. "How long do we have?" "Minutes, maybe less," Jansen replied. "I don't understand. Everything was fine a second ago. It's like something just drained them." Evelyn's mind raced. The engines were state-of-the-art, designed to withstand the harshest conditions of deep space. For them to fail so suddenly, without warning, was impossible. Unless... "Captain," she said, her voice tight, "we need to get out of here, now." Marcus didn't argue. He turned to the helm, his hands flying over the controls. "Prepare for emergency jump. Plot a course back to the nearest relay station." The crew moved quickly, their training overriding their fear. But as the ship's systems whirred to life, preparing for the jump, Evelyn felt the knot in her chest tighten. The stars outside the window were almost completely dark now, their light swallowed by an impenetrable void. And then, just as the ship's engines began to hum with the energy of the jump, she saw it. A shape, vast and incomprehensible, moving silently through the darkness. It was not a ship, nor any natural phenomenon she could name. It was something else, something that defied description. Its surface, if it could be called a surface, shifted and writhed as though alive. And in the center of it, a single massive eye, glowing with a light that was not light, stared directly at her. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She tried to speak, to warn the others, but no sound came out. The eye held her, pinned her in place with a gaze that seemed to pierce through her very soul. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the shape was gone, vanishing into the darkness as though it had never been. The ship lurched violently as the jump engines engaged, and Evelyn was thrown to the floor. The world around her dissolved into a blur of light and sound, and then, just as quickly, solidified again. The emergency lights flickered and died, replaced by the steady glow of normal lighting. The alarms fell silent. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Marcus spoke, his voice shaky. "What the hell was that?" Evelyn pushed herself to her feet, her legs trembling. She looked out the observation window, half expecting to see the shape again, but the stars were normal now, their light steady and unchanging. She turned to Marcus, her mind racing. "I don't know," she said, "but whatever it was, it's gone now." But she knew, deep down, that it wasn't gone. It was still out there, watching, waiting, and it had seen them. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the ship's systems, but the damage was extensive. The engines were beyond repair and the ship's power reserves were dangerously low. They were adrift, with no way to call for help and no hope of reaching the relay station on their own. Evelyn spent most of her time in the lab, poring over the sensor data from the encounter. There was nothing, no trace of the shape, no evidence that it had ever been there. But she knew what she had seen, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that it had not been an illusion. She was interrupted by a knock on the lab door. She looked up to see Marcus standing in the doorway, his face drawn and tired. "We need to talk," he said. Evelyn nodded, setting her tablet aside. "What's on your mind?" Marcus stepped into the lab, closing the door behind him. "The crew is getting restless. They're scared, Evelyn, and I don't blame them. Whatever that thing was, it's not something we're equipped to handle. We need a plan." Evelyn sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know, but I don't have any answers. The sensors didn't pick up anything. It's like it doesn't exist." "But it does," Marcus said, his voice firm. "We both saw it, and I don't think it's done with us." Evelyn's stomach churned. She had been trying to push the thought from her mind, but Marcus's words brought it crashing back. The eye staring at her into her, it had seen her, and it had known her. "What do you suggest we do?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, then spoke. "We need to find out what it is. If we can understand it, maybe we can find a way to defend ourselves." Evelyn shook her head. "Marcus, we're scientists, not soldiers. We're not equipped to fight something like that." "We don't have a choice," Marcus said. "If we don't figure this out, we're dead. And not just us. If that thing decides to head toward Earth..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Evelyn knew what he was thinking. If the shape, whatever it was, decided to turn its attention toward Earth, there would be no stopping it. Humanity would be wiped out, not with a bang, but with a whimper. "All right," she said finally. "We'll keep looking. But we need to be careful. Whatever that thing is, it's not something we can understand. Not yet." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "Agreed, but we don't have much time." The days turned into weeks, and the crew of the Erebus grew increasingly desperate. Supplies were running low, and the ship's systems were failing one by one. But Evelyn refused to give up. She spent every waking moment in the lab, analyzing every scrap of data, searching for any clue that might help them understand what they had encountered. And then, one day, she found something. It was buried deep in the ship's sensor logs, a faint signal that had been overlooked in the chaos of the encounter. At first, Evelyn thought it was a glitch, a random fluctuation in the data, but as she dug deeper, she realized it was something else entirely. The signal was a pattern, a sequence of numbers that repeated over and over again. It was not random, it was a message, and it was coming from the shape. Evelyn's hands trembled as she worked to decode the message. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. A language that was not a language, a code that was not a code. But slowly, painstakingly, she began to unravel its meaning. And what she found chilled her to the bone. The message was a warning from the entity that had encountered them. It was not a threat, not in the traditional sense. It was a statement of fact, a cold, unfeeling declaration of the universe's true nature. "You are not alone," the message said, "but you are insignificant, you are nothing, and you will be erased." Evelyn stared at the words, her mind reeling. The entity was not hostile, not in the way they had feared. It was indifferent. It saw them as nothing more than a fleeting curiosity, a momentary blip in the vast, uncaring cosmos, and it was right. She felt the weight of the message pressing down on her, crushing her under the enormity of its truth. Humanity was insignificant. Their struggles, their achievements, their very existence, it was all meaningless in the face of the universe's infinite expanse. But there was more. The message contained coordinates, a location deep in uncharted space. It was an invitation, a challenge. The entity wanted them to come, to see for themselves the true nature of the universe. Evelyn knew it was a trap, but she also knew they had no choice. If they stayed where they were, they would die, and if they went to the coordinates, they might find answers. Answers that could save them or destroy them. She called a meeting of the crew explaining what she had found. There was no debate, no discussion. They all knew what had to be done. The journey to the coordinates took weeks, the Erebus limping through space on its failing engines. But finally, they arrived. The sight that greeted them was beyond comprehension. It was a star, but not a star. It burned with a light that was not light, a heat that was not heat. It was alive, pulsing and writhing like a living thing, and around it, orbiting in impossible patterns, were planets, worlds that defied the laws of physics, their surfaces shifting and changing as though they were made of liquid. But the most horrifying thing was the entity. It was there, waiting for them, its massive eyes staring out from the heart of the star. It was not a separate being. Evelyn realized. It was the star itself. The star was alive and it was watching them. The crew of the Erebus could only stare in mute horror as the entity, the sun monster, reached out to them. It did not attack, did not destroy, it simply observed. And in that observation, Evelyn felt the full weight of humanity's insignificance. They were nothing, less than nothing, and they always had been. The message had been clear. They were not alone, but they were insignificant, and they would be erased. Evelyn closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. She had sought knowledge, understanding, and she had found it. But it was a knowledge that could not be born, an understanding that shattered the very foundations of her being. And then, slowly, it turned away, its attention shifting to something else, something beyond the comprehension of the tiny, fragile beings that had dared to seek it out. The Erebus drifted, powerless and alone, in the shadow of the sun monster, and Evelyn knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and liberating, that they would never leave. They had sought the truth, and they had found it. But the truth was a monster, and it had devoured them whole. The moral of the story is this: there are some truths that humanity is not meant to know. The universe is vast and incomprehensible, and our place in it is fragile and insignificant. To seek knowledge beyond our understanding is to risk losing everything, not just our lives, but our very sense of self. The sun monster is a reminder of the dangers of curiosity, of the hubris that drives us to seek answers to questions we are not equipped to ask. And in the end, it is a warning: some doors once opened can never be closed.